Welcome to Endless Chit Chat, a new podcast featuring two college friends talking about the issues they face at this big age and all the things that interest them from fashion, music, movies, books, and art, and maybe a little bit of politics. So join Verlinda Powell and Liana Yankson Wilcox as they step out of their respective comfort zones and bring life to the topics of the day with their unique voices to make Endless Chit Chat a must listen event. If you want to know about all things Endless Chit Chat, follow us on Instagram or subscribe to the Endless Chit Chat webpage. But most importantly, subscribe to the Endless Chit Chat podcast to stay up to date on the last, the anger, and interesting exchanges on topics you want to hear clever takes on. Endless Chit Chat will be your new fave. Hi, Liana.
Morning, Berlinda.
Hey, good morning. How are you today?
Good.
That's great. It's sunny here, so it's always all good when the sun is out. And we're back for another episode.
Yes, we are. We're going to be talking about our childhood today.
Yeah, all things the 80s, which sometimes the 80s get a bad rap, but we had some fun times back then. And yeah, why not go down memory lane, see what we come up with?
Yes, I love it. I want to tell the people more about ourselves. So, a lot of things happened in the 80s.
Definitely. A lot, a lot. We're part of the infamous group known as the Gen Xers, the
Yes.
group that nobody knows quite what to do with. And it
Mhm.
seems like on Instagram, everybody wants to come for us. And it's like, no, we're feral animals. Leave us alone. You don't
Don't
want to
mess
do
with us.
that.
You
Don't
don't
mess
want
with
to.
us.
You don't want to find out.
Right. You just don't want to. You're going to mess around and find out.
Yes.
So it's kind of funny, just like when you see some of the Instagram posts. And then on the other side, you see the Instagram posts talking about, do you remember Operation, or do you remember Family Ties, and all the different little, things that were part of like our upbringing during the 80s. So, yeah, this should be a interesting walk down memory lane talking about the 80s and the good old days, if we can call
Yeah.
them that. So I guess I would ask you, what was one of your favorite memories from the 80s?
Fashion, I would say. Acid wash jeans. T-shirts with a lot of logos on them or pop stars on them. Well, I naturally have big hair, so I don't know if that was part of the 80s for me. Thankfully, my hairstyle fit in with the style of the 80s. Yeah. Also, the music. Honestly, there was just so many different music styles that were popping off in the 80s, from hip hop to grunge to even R&B and pop as well, pop music. And thankfully MTV. We are all known as the MTV generation.
So you mentioned fashion. Do you
Mhm.
remember FUBU and Cross Colors?
I remember FUBU,
Yeah, for us, by us. Yeah. I
but
believe,
I
yeah,
didn't have it in my town. I only saw it on TV.
right.
Yeah.
Which was, partly due to MTV and stuff. Like,
Hmm.
what one thing about fashion that you would say is characterized the 80s for you?
For me, yeah. I think one thing, it's hard to, I would say bright colors. If I were to be specific about it, bright colors to me was a mix of like layer, like baggy but tight, and the combination of both. Uh,
It was
I,
definitely that new wave,
mhm,
kind of, like the whole Boy George,
mhm.
that whole kind of wham and stuff. If you go back and look at, their music videos very colorful, people wearing the leg warmers, people wearing bright colors and so forth.
Mm-hmm.
Very much in that vein.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And
Yeah.
like
Like
I
the whole fat belts with the leg warmers. Yeah.
like
Mm-hmm.
I'm not a bright color person, but I remember like even when you look at the music videos, that was a statement in and of itself, like the neon colors, the bright colors, that kind of went with like the new wave music and just what you were seeing in the music videos and what was popping, and
Mm-hmm.
so forth.
Mm-hmm.
Um, I think for me, like what stood out about the '80s, like there's not just one thing, but MTV, because I like music, and
Mm-hmm.
so
Mm-hmm.
I watched MTV a lot, and
Mm-hmm.
everything from new wave music to pop music to getting into hip hop and rap, and then a little bit of grunge. Like I like MTV. It was like, okay, who is putting out a new video? What is this video? What's the aesthetic of the video? Can we mimic the video? And
Mm-hmm.
it was definitely a time where you knew all the words to a song and stuff.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And all your friends knew all the words to a song, and it was like your must see TV. It's like, oh, did you see that new video? Blah 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 and stuff.
Mm-hmm.
What was interesting is that I had recently seen an article. They were talking about the early days of MTV,
Mm-hmm.
and how the lack of black artists when they first started, and
Mm-hmm.
just getting Michael Jackson onto MTV, and how um, his record label really almost threatened to pull the other artists, which would have been white artists, from MTV if they weren't going to pay Michael Jackson. And that seems odd, since when you look at that Thriller album that made MTV, like
Mm-hmm.
MTV, you
Mm-hmm.
know blew
Mm-hmm.
up with that whole album and so forth. And it's not saying that MTV wasn't important before then, but when you look at that, the early days of MTV, who were your big people? Michael Jackson, Prince, Madonna.
Mm-hmm.
Um, those were some of the early artists that truly came to
Whitney
be
Houston?
known as MTV.
Yeah.
But
I mean,
that's
it's,
just
yeah, interesting. I feel like things were moving so fast in terms of this, but it's still new, this kind of focus on music in that way. And behind the scenes, we probably weren't really aware of what these artists were having to endure in terms of what you mentioned, their music being released, or what
yeah.
kinds of concerts they might be playing, even though their audience was growing at a rapid pace, you know. And
And like you mentioned the impact of for the '80s fashion on you. When
mhm.
you get later into the '80s with like a George Michael and all the supermodels in his music videos, they're definitely, the '80s brought a merging of fashion and music.
For sure, you're right. And the the more you mention some of those artists, essentially was mimicking what they were wearing, um,
Right.
and that's what you would find to honestly in the stores. And
Yeah.
then you'd see people dressing like that to school,
Right.
to school,
It's
like
like
Madonna or
mhm.
Michael Jackson or even some of the hip hop artists. I mean, the whole grunge thing. You suddenly saw a whole group, cliques of people that were, oh, those are the grungy people. They're into that
Right.
kind of music. And those genres of music would essentially describe the cliques in high school.
Yeah, because grunge, it was the baggy jeans, the plaid shirts, and so forth, the t-shirts. That was part of the look. When Thriller came out, the jacket that he was wearing in the video, they started selling that, and everybody was wearing the Thriller jacket.
Mm-hmm.
It
Mm-hmm.
definitely was music influencing fashion and what you were seeing what people were wearing, like, and if you go back to like even like a culture club with Boy George and stuff, people were wearing that whole loose baggy, you know
Mm-hmm.
it was white with some neon colors and so
Mm-hmm.
forth, but you definitely started having people mimic what they were seeing from music videos, the fashion they were seeing in these music videos. And so MTV, for me, definitely had a big impact, from the start. And you're talking about music videos, but then when you get later into the decade and going into the early 90s, you're talking about them being the first with like reality shows like Real World and Road Rules and stuff. And that what you're seeing now are just offshoots of a lot of that. I miss MTV because I miss the
Yeah.
music videos and the music
Mm-hmm.
videos being all in one place.
Mm-hmm.
Because what, like in the last week, they shut down MTV News, like the online, being able to find all the news stories, music news
Oh,
stories.
really? I didn't even know
And
that. Okay.
yeah, just and that became a big story, particularly on Instagram, about the shutting down of MTV News. I think when I last saw something in the last day or two, some company then stepped in to take over that whole
Mm-hmm.
archive, because a lot of people was like, well, you have all of these really important musical news moments that is just
Mm-hmm.
going to be lost.
Mm-hmm.
And there was concern about this a whole archive going away. But in the last, like I said, in the last day or two, I kind of heard that somebody then stepped in where, and really the archive, the MTV News archive is going to be saved. But that's a lot of moments, and it's music history, but it's also part of our pop culture and how we end up where we are right now. So, um, yeah, like I just go back to MTV, it just being that moment in the 80s, that and a continuing moment in the 80s, because you get Yo MTV raps and stuff, and you
Uh-huh.
see the rise of hip hop and rap, and
Uh-huh.
as it becomes part of the mainstream culture. So
Uh-huh.
the impact of MTV, I think, on our generation and just on the greater culture has been significant. So
Yeah. And it's making me think of the diversity that promoted. To have a representation of such diverse genres of music that not only include different music styles, um, that reference different cultures as well. And then you see the fashion, and you see women and men, because I mean, let's say in R&B, and it was also a proliferation of more female groups. Like I was thinking of TLC, and I mean, they were so impactful, and their music was just incredible, and they combined rap and singing. And Left Eye, who unfortunately has passed away, one of the members, like, she dressed like a man, honestly, and like that was new too.
yeah.
And just to have all of those representations that could just sort of impact you and make you think about how you might want to move in life, dress in life, or how you might want to create things for yourself. That was something that was completely, I would say, that was partly revolutionary for that time. Yeah.
And as you mentioned that you're talking about impact, like when
Mhm.
you talk about a TLC who is at the end of the 80s into the early 90s, won the baggy clothes, the colorful clothes, but they also, had a message. Left Eye had the condom, over
Mhm.
her one eye, and
Mhm.
there was a message there. When you look at just in general, like Live Aid, and all the
Mhm.
different, aid concerts that happened in the 80s and stuff, and using that vehicle of music to
Mhm.
make a difference. You've not seen big events like that in recent years and so forth.
Mhm.
And I will have to find the name of this documentary. Is on Netflix, and it's about the making of We Are the World. And
Oh, okay.
it is really good. I believe Lionel Richie is one of the producers. But
Mhm.
it was interesting to see all the different artists from the different genres come together to make this song We Are the World.
Mhm. Mhm.
That was to go to, raise funds regarding the famine that was going on at the time.
Mhm.
And sat there looking at, you had your Michael Jacksons, you had your Cyndi Laupers and Huey
Mhm.
Lewis, and Al Jarreau and Ray Charles and Stevie Wonder and all these different artists from a lot of
Mhm.
different genres there, Diana Ross, to perform. And one of my thoughts was, could you pull that off today?
That's a
Because
good
mind you, some people came with, family members and stuff, but they were held in a separate room. This is pre cell phones, and
Mm.
so forth. But with and the people you have now, and everybody has cell phones, everybody have handlers, the assistants, and so forth, besides their family members. Could you pull off an event like that today? Could you get the people, different artists, to buy in for a event like that? So it's
Mhm.
really interesting to see the type of events that went on during the 80s, and big events that involved a lot of well-known artists. And you
Mhm.
have to sit back and think, could you actually do that today? Is people too ego driven, and everything else to pull off a big event? But I will, get the name of the documentary so we can link it below, because if you like music, it's a very good documentary to watch. And it's just interesting how they brought all the artists together to do the
Mhm.
song We Are the World, and even how it got written. um,
Mhm.
but I just, my the side note for me is, could you do something like that today?
Yeah, that's a good question because it makes me think, was it more about the music back in the 80s and partially the 90s that we're talking about then than it is now? Because I did think of, well, the amount of money these artists make now, and just to get people to do an event now, I can't even imagine how much you have to pay these people, or how many tickets, in a sense, you have to sort of guarantee will be sold, um, to be able to come up with an offer where you could
Right,
have two, more than two,
right,
even if it's for charity. Even if
right,
it's for charity, yeah, you make such a good point because what they make now, and along with that comes an ego and whatever the whole machine that they run and, as their business. um, would they even agree to that? Yeah.
right, right.
Yeah.
It's
It
just
makes me think
interesting.
not. It makes me think not. So is it about the music? Because yeah, you're like, now I don't even know where I find out about new music. Like, I would have to think about it. Before, I felt like it was easier to know because part because of MTV, but um yeah,
I
I
think
mean,
everything is so
music. Yeah, I
dispersed.
mean, music stores existed.
Right,
Like,
right,
everything's in the cloud now. It's not. It doesn't seem as tangible. And
Yeah, and buying CDs or even buying cassettes and
Makes
stuff.
sense,
That's right.
yeah, because I
That
think my mom had those little 45 records, so literally
right.
I had
Yeah,
a
my
small
parents did
collection.
too.
I
Right.
had a small collection, and then because, in fact, we even had a friend who had that 8-track in his car.
Oh, okay. Yeah.
So I knew what that looked like, and then it went to cassettes, and then it's CDs, and now you don't even see a CD.
Right. Because for me, like like I had Purple Rain on as an album and Thriller as an album and
Mhm.
New Edition and
Oh,
DeBarge.
no, new edition! I
Yeah.
love new edition.
So that those were some of the albums that I had, and I mean, granted, there is a niche group of people out there that still do vinyl and stuff, and then some DJs, but just going and buying an album um or cassette tape and everything, because we kind of spoke about this, like the 80s was also the time where you had um movies with big soundtracks, and
Mhm.
everybody was familiar with the soundtrack. And I mentioned to you, like, I just recently watched Beverly Hills Cop, and from the beginning of the movie, it's like, okay, I know this song, I still know the words to the song. This movie came out during the 80s,
Mhm.
and we just knew the soundtrack to the movies. And you don't even have movies now with those like big soundtracks and stuff, with
Yeah,
all the songs
and
that end up on on the radio and even going number one.
mhm.
That was definitely a 80s and 90s thing with those big soundtracks.
Definitely, yeah. You look forward to the soundtrack just as much as the movie, and it's kind of odd in a sense that that doesn't still occur because as a capitalist country, why why wouldn't you want both of those things to be successful? Because I think it each makes the other stronger. Like you make the movie have more of an impact, and then the music has more of an impact, um, and then you're selling more things. And
Right.
this kind of like, it's too bad that that's not the
Yeah, you
trend
just
anymore. I don't know what is not
right.
the
You just
trend.
don't have the movies with like the soundtrack, and you have at least 3 or 4 songs from the soundtrack that's playing on the radio all the time. You just yeah.
I mean, yeah, and those kind of memories and those experiences you go back to as you live your
Right.
life, like think of where you were, or when it comes on, it kind of just creates a whole new reliving that experience at a party or something. It's really
And it was
enjoyable.
all types of movies that had those type of soundtracks, like that had at least one, maybe multiple songs, on the soundtrack that people identify with. Like you would get the little like some of the little comedies like Weird Science, or
Oh,
thinking of I can't think of the other. It was a college movie, but then you had your movies like You're Pretty in Pink and
yes. Oh,
16
yeah.
Candles and stuff. Like
Yeah.
those were definitely movies that were a moment. And when you go back to like your whole discussion about fashion, like
Mhm. Mhm.
Pretty in Pink was its own, like, part of the
Mhm.
movie was about fashion
Mhm.
because she had to come up with her outfit to go to the dance.
Yeah.
And then she and Ducky definitely had a distinct look compared to the rich kids and stuff. So there in the 80s, music and fashion, kind of just went hand in hand.
They really did. Yeah.
There was
Yeah.
just it was always very interesting. Like TV show wise, was there anything that was must see TV for you in the 80s?
Yes. I mean, there, well, like you just said, must see TV was a term of the 80s.
Right. Right.
And we did talk about some of these shows, but Family Ties was one of my favorites. Cosby Show, I know it has its
Yeah.
problems now, but
Right. Right.
for when it was,
For when it was, you know.
back then we didn't know what we know now.
Right.
it
Exactly.
it was still a good show. We won't take away from that. Uh, um, I'm trying to think. Your memory is better than mine. But there
Because
were a
I
ton of shows. Oh, let me think. I was into soap operas thanks to my babysitter. My first and main babysitter. She loves soap operas, so I eventually got into all of them. But hers was As the World Turns. Her
okay.
favorite was As the World Turns. So maybe not the most popular soap opera of its time. And then Days of Our Lives, and then that led into Dynasty, Falcon
Right.
Crest, Knots
Yep.
Landing. I did
Yep.
not miss those shows.
Right.
Okay.
Right. Because people don't understand. You had the daytime soap operas, and then you had the nighttime soap operas. So you morphed into like the nighttime soap operas. Because I watched General Hospital, After
Oh,
School, One Life to Live, Ryan's Hope. Those were the ABC soap
oh,
operas.
oh. Hmm.
Because there was something always jumping off on General Hospital. And when you talk about big songs, they had like a number of big songs come off of that show, which was interesting too. But then you started talking about like Falcon Crest and Dynasty and Knots Landing. That was your nighttime, and Dallas. Dallas
Dallas.
was
Oh my gosh. Yes.
yeah.
I would not miss any of those shows. Never missed it. And this is, for VCRs.
Right. Exactly.
Being
Because
able to
Dallas was Who Shot JR.
We shot JR, yes.
Right.
And I thought, this is just a side note, but it was once I was in college, because some of these American shows would show in other countries, but years later. So when I was in college, I spent a semester abroad in Paris. And during that, Who Shot JR were in their versions of the TV tabloid magazines. I was like,
Right.
what? Who shot JR? But that's what they were about to watch. You find out years later. That was kind
and
of
and
funny.
like everybody was into the nighttime soap operas, like, and you don't have nighttime soap operas anymore. Like,
No, you
there's
don't.
not, but that was once again TV you had to tune into
Yeah,
and
yeah.
stuff, like, and you kind of miss it because it was something where everybody would watch, and then you would go to school and did you see, and everybody was talking about it. Obviously, there was the Thursday night lineup, which we've already talked about, the one problematic show that was in the now that we know in the Thursday night lineup. But like Cheers and a different world is part of that Thursday night lineup. But then you had, like, for ABC, you had Family Matters and Who's
Mm.
the Boss and
Who's the boss? Yes.
Boy Meets World and all types of, like, those were I definitely checked out like the ABC shows. And if you go further back, it's the Family Ties, Growing Pains, and then Alf.
Okay.
Alf was interesting. But
I
like
I can say I watch that show a lot, but I mean, when you think of it now,
right,
it's like, why was that show so successful?
right.
It was a bit odd.
Yeah, it was a bit odd, and stuff. It definitely
Oh,
was.
wait, I thought of another one, Golden Girls. Was that in 80s, or did it start
Yeah,
earlier than that?
I feel like it was the tail end of the 80s.
Oh,
I
okay.
feel like Golden Girls was the tail end of the 80s
Okay.
and into the early 90s, but I could be
I may be biased. The writing was very good on all of these shows. I feel like they perhaps cheesy at times, but there was a lesson. Oftentimes with the
right.
sitcoms, there's some lesson to be learned. It made it kind of wholesome.
Golden Girls ran from 1985 to I believe 1992, so they had 7 seasons.
Oh, okay. So yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
So I think when you talk about like the writing, what's interesting is that there was a lot of topics
Mm-hmm.
that you saw addressed, from the soap operas to the comedies to the dramas
Mm-hmm.
that you kind of don't get as much. I think because of the era, that was the time when you're dealing with the early days of AIDS. So shows had to deal with AIDS, HIV, be it also dealing with issues of domestic abuse and things like that. You did, or and just drugs.
Mm-hmm.
That was like, what was the big campaign during the 80s?
Don't do
With
drugs.
yeah, it's like basically with the
Wasn't it?
Reagan
Don't do drugs.
administration. Yeah,
What isn't that Nancy Reagan? Don't do
yeah,
drugs.
yeah. So that was the big thing for us and everything. So there was a lot of big issues that were dealt with on our TV shows that I don't think people really realize. That like you had everything from, like, I remember on General Hospital, they addressed the AIDS, HIV issue, and one of the characters was HIV positive. There was a number of big issues that were addressed in all your different type of shows that were on during that time. And then, like, what people don't have today is we had the after school specials. Those
Yeah.
which was addressing you know drugs
Yeah.
and all the other issues that would come up and stuff, and they would get dealt with in an after school special. Like, it's funny that we had all of that, and when you look at like our TV landscape now, it's like, oh, okay.
Yeah, that's what I'm thinking because I don't. I mean, I don't watch a ton of TV shows right now, or have in recent years, and I wonder what the generations after us think of that comparison, because you're saying, I mean, there was a lot of issues that were dealt with on sitcoms and soap operas that, I mean, some people might say it might be a little too conventional, or um, but they're in a way trying to I mean, guide you into what you might experience as you become an adult, or live your life. Is that like preachy? I don't know if that
Right.
comes off as preachy or just like generic. Like I didn't feel that when I was growing up. Whereas now, like I think it does help to give you an example of something that you might experience, so it does. There's a learning lesson there. But now, I mean, I just think of all the crime shit, like the what is it? Oh gosh, the shows that are on now are like set in a hospital. Or if it's
Right.
those cop shows. What are those
Right.
shows which are escaping my mind? Like,
Yeah, like
they
your
talk
Law
about
and Order.
crimes.
Yeah.
Law and Order.
Your
Yeah.
Grey's Anatomy and stuff. But
Mm-hmm.
they're not the same. Like, technically, General Hospital takes place in a hospital, but like I said, they had a character who was HIV positive, so they dealt with that
Mm-hmm.
storyline and stuff in the
Mm-hmm.
80s. And then there was the storyline about drugs, because you had the big, just say no.
Mm-hmm.
That was the campaign. Just
That
say
was what
no.
it was. Oh my god!
Yeah,
I
don't do
said, "Don't do
drugs. Like,
drugs."
no, it was
Yes,
just
it
say
was.
no.
It was.
That was
It was. Don't do drugs, Berlinda.
but just say no,
They
and
say
that
no.
was
Oh
and
my
so
god!
you
Sorry.
had multiple shows dealing with drugs or potential drug use, or have you, and avoiding the pitfalls of drugs. And I think you make a point, like, if you did that now, would it be considered preachy? But
Mm-hmm.
on the flip side, I would I would send it back to you and say, could you even do a lot of those issues now? I would argue no,
Because
because it's
people might
similar.
get offended or
Correct.
I think it's inappropriate. You're mischaracterizing this way of life or whatever. But it also
Yeah.
makes me think, which we were talking about in other episodes, it's like the focus was the relationships in a sense too. I felt like the shows we watched were a lot about the relationships and your interactions with people.
Right.
You know,
Right.
me is that is interesting. Like, why
Right.
wouldn't people want to be interested in that?
Because when you look at Family Ties or Growing Pains or Family Matters and stuff, it was about all the different people that made up these families and their relationships, and how sometimes the relationship got strained due to whatever issue, and how do
Hmm.
you come back from that. And a show like Boy Meets World, where yes, it was a comedy, but then it was also about the growing pains from preteen to teen and just
Hmm.
growing up. And once again, the relationship with your family, the relationship with your friends, the relationship with yourself and stuff.
Hmm. Hmm.
Um,
That's
but
good.
I think topic wise, regardless of whether it was your daytime, soaps or your nighttime soaps or even your comedies and so forth, you really wonder if some of the issues that were addressed during the 80s, could you address them now and address them in a whole honest way? Because
Hmm.
I feel like everybody wants to be offended, but also there's a lot of believing that you're trying to push a certain agenda.
Hmm.
And when it came to the HIV/AIDS you know epidemic, it was about trying to educate people and trying to save lives and
Hmm.
also calm fears. And I don't know if you could run a lot of the shows storylines that you did in the 80s now, because I think you would get accused of promoting a certain agenda,
Hmm.
and that's
Yeah.
unfortunate.
Yeah, it is unfortunate. Yeah.
you
Because
know
if you say something is about if you say something is about a certain topic, I think it's fair for people to just believe that. If you don't plan to have a different agenda, then that's not your intention. But yeah, nowadays it's like, well, it doesn't matter what your intention is.
right.
This is how I perceive it, so therefore it's wrong. Yeah.
And what's also was interesting about the 80s is, like, on sticking with TV, but I think there's something that can be said about music. Like, we had a connection to our parents' generation of what they grew up on. So, like, you could watch Leave It to Beaver or Bonanza or the Jetsons or Tom and Jerry and stuff like that. Those were shows that my parents watched
Hmm.
and
Hmm.
grew up on, and we were able was a Leave It to Beaver fan, so I've seen a lot of Leave It to Beaver. And then when
So
they
have I.
did the new version of Leave It to Beaver, I seen that too. So
Oh,
because that was her show, and
okay.
so I feel like we also had a connection to our parents' generation, that boomer generation, and like at least the music and the TV that they grew up on, because you were still hearing like the Temptations and the Supremes, and a lot of Stevie Wonder, and a lot of your old Motown during the 80s and so forth. And so I feel like we had a connection to our parents' youth, our parents, what our parents grew up on, compared to now. Like, a lot of the shows we're talking about, you can barely find on TV.
Hmm.
So when you look at our generation, and for those who have had kids, they really can't find a lot of the stuff that we grew up on, like MTV, BET, VH1, are not the same.
Mm-hmm.
They're not showing music videos.
Mm-hmm.
MTV is Jersey Shores, essentially. It's not music videos. VH1 used to be like the adult contemporary music videos. They're showing a bunch of reality shows. And then, you have BET, which is, firmly hip hop, rap, and R&B. But
Mm-hmm.
none of these, networks really show music videos anymore.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, you're right. They don't,
You know,
and
everybody's trying to find them on YouTube.
there you go. I mean, some of these younger generations do that when they're into YouTube. I think what it created for us is that an understanding, a better understanding of our parents and how they grew up, and probably helped to bond us, and connect us.
Yeah, because I
And
mean,
and be able to communicate when we made different choices. You know, instead of being as judgmental or you know.
I think that when you look at some of the TV that they grew up on, is definitely a very more conservative time.
Hmm.
And
Hmm.
we were impacted by a lot of big events, the Space Shuttle Challenger and everything else. Like you know, we as a generation were impacted by a lot of events, and then also kind of, forgotten and stuff. And so we've kind of just been grinding and, making our way. It's funny when you see on like Instagram, when you see like Gen Xers posting like, where is Gen Xers? What are they doing? It's like, no, you don't want none of this fire. We're feral animals. Just leave us alone. You don't want none of this fire. So we're kind of that generation that has just is just grinding it out.
Yes, yes. I mean, I think partly because we're in size, number of people, we're smaller than the
Correct.
boomers and the generation after us. That's one reason we were forgotten. And being in a sandwich, even though the inside of the sandwich is what makes it tasty. What is most noticeable is the bread. Okay, if you want to put in terms of social media, we were adults when when it became popular. We growing up, it was not around. So there are still large groups of our generation that were forced to, or just had no choice but to get with technology. I think it depended on your occupation, but because we experienced a lot of change, like you mentioned.
Right.
I mean, there was the we did experience a recession, the cold, what is that, the Cold War ending.
Right.
These changes in music and fashion. We're resilient, we're independent, and I think a lot of us don't really care what you think of us,
Right.
so
Right.
you may be mentioning where we're at, but we don't care to respond to where we're
Right.
at
Yes,
because we
that
know
part.
exactly where we're at. We're
Right.
grinding.
Right. Yeah,
we're
we know what we've been through.
Yes, we know we don't need to repeat it or post it.
Right. We're still here.
We're living it.
Yeah, we're living it. And I
Yeah.
think that's odd to the generations behind us, because they're very well steeped in social media, cell phones, and so forth. And we were in our 20s getting cell phones, and we didn't
Mhm.
have social media. There, Facebook is at like pretty much, I think, the tail end of us getting out of college, maybe a few years after us out of college, is Facebook. So
Right.
we went from our elementary, middle school, junior high school without any of that.
Yeah.
We were playing
Mhm.
outside, and basically, it's like, oh, your parents telling you go do whatever, just don't get hit by a car. come home by the time the lights go down. Like, we
Exactly.
were
Yeah.
unsupervised.
Sure. Yes. In fact, we were known as the latchkey
Yeah, latchkey generation. Yeah,
generation because a lot of us had parents who, both
right.
parents who worked,
And I was one of them.
or a single parent.
Right,
So you got home on your own.
right. I fell into that category. When I got
Yeah.
home, there was nobody home. Let myself in, get a
Hmm.
snack, and then I was watching General Hospital. That's now, should I have been watching General Hospital? Probably not. But no harm, no
Yeah.
foul.
Well, I was watching As the World Turns, so
Right,
it's okay.
right.
We turned
So
out fine.
right. So I mean, we are the generation that is just grinding it out
Hmm.
and just keep it moving forward. The number of when you say change and big events, when you look at the 80s, because we didn't even mention like Anita Hill, and
Hmm.
that's really is, coming into the late 80s, early 90s, but like, as we transition into college and that being a big issue, that's part of what shaped this generation also. So you have all of these, you know, events from, all your live aid events to the space shuttle to like ending when we were in college where you are into Anita Hill. Like
Hmm.
a lot of big events happened during our formative years that comparatively I think the generations that come behind us don't really understand. All of these events happened and maybe all you had was maybe a camera. You didn't have that cell phone that with the
Hmm.
camera that did video. You didn't have social media so you could post it real quickly. So like I remember, I believe it was 89, 90, going to see Belle Biv DeVoe. I didn't get to post that everywhere, on social media and stuff. Or like, the
But
very
it's still just as memorable, I'm
correct,
sure,
correct,
as opposed to not having, you were watching it with your eyes
right.
instead of through the lens of your camera
Right.
phone.
And experiencing it and stuff. And that's just like the very first concert at Oberlin. So this is like 91 was Tribe Called Quest after they finished their album Midnight Marauders. Like, but it's not posted,
Right,
But
right,
we
right.
had a great time. And Q-Tip
Yeah.
almost lost his voice during the concert.
Oh, okay.
So there's all of that. And plus, we didn't need to have most of our moments at Oberlin recorded because we did some dumb stuff.
It's up here. It's okay.
It's up
Yeah.
here. It's all up
Yes.
here.
Yes. And
And you don't need to know it. You don't need to know it.
yeah, I do think it's partly because of all of those things that happened, and I looked at it as we endured a lot of transitions.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
we also touched upon this just when we were before we started recording, but just the when you're in a transition, I think sometimes people not necessarily as impacted by it um, want to forget about it.
Right.
Yeah. Like you want to you remember the beginning and then whatever it turned into after.
Right.
So that transitional period which we're living is that has the most impact on us.
Right.
But then they don't talk about us as that
Right.
as the event. It's more the after and the before.
Yeah. Because there's so many big events that have, if you just look at pop culture, has influenced pop culture, and the biggest one being MTV.
Hmm.
Those were transitional events
Hmm.
that shaped us, and how we engage with like music, with fashion, with whatever the case may be. And then and like I think and that may be true of any given generation. The people coming behind really don't quite understand or get it because they weren't living that moment. And, as you get further away from that moment and our lack of wanting to teach history or
Mm.
understand what has previously happened, you don't understand the big moments. Like, I think if you go to anybody and talk about the space shuttle exploding, wow, and this was a big event for kids, and we were all in school watching this event, and we watched it happen on TV, live TV, like, there's gonna be a lack of understanding of something like that. Or, just like I said, like your live aid events, whether it was for the farmers or for famine in, Ethiopia, or some other African nation, you're not going to understand why those became global events, and
Mhm.
everybody, it became a moment for everybody living at that point in time and stuff, and kind of changed how, you think about charity and how to raise funds for events, and that the fact that you can have impact, and I'm living, in the United States, and yes, this nation is far away from me, but I can have some type of impact, and
Mhm.
use something that is, you know music to make that impact
Mhm.
and
Mhm.
stuff. So I mean, we're an interesting generation.
Yes, we are. Yes, we
Yeah.
are.
And I
Even
think you, yeah,
even though people want to continue to forget about us.
of course. But sometimes it's good to be forgotten because then they won't see you coming.
There you go. There you
There
go.
you go. There you go.
Well, we
Well, as
know our
usual, yeah.
value. We know our value. We know you're standing on our shoulders. We know.
Well, as usual, it's always good talking to you, Liana.
Oh, I am loving these for Linda.
Well, thank you everyone for listening to Endless Chit Chat. I'm Verlinda.
And I'm Liana.
And we'll see you next time. Don't forget to hit the subscribe button on our podcast, and make sure you check us out on Instagram and on our webpage. And we will see you next time.
Oh, wait, for Linda, do you remember that time?